menu of things that you can sell. We also do secure electronic messaging, which is also known as email encryption. We incorporate RESTful APIs to make these technologies work in an embedded fashion or a workflow fashion, as opposed to a one-size-fits-all blanket type of a security, which you get with many secure messaging packages like Zix or Mimecast or Proofpoint. I guess for your project, we are mainly focusing on folks that want to take advantage of pay-for-value programs, including promoting interoperability, meaningful use, MIPS, and there's a ton of others that require the data sharing infrastructure that we provide. So you could also have shared savings programs, ACOs, any entity that is reimbursement space. Those are all good prospects for us because they all need to share data across organizations and with endpoints that they have never necessarily before had to connect to, including social determinants, that might come from some kind of maybe a therapist's office or some sort of a community-based practice. So I hope that I didn't overstay my welcome with that, but that's in a nutshell what we do, what we hope to do for you, and more to come.
Great, that was actually very helpful, very informative. Let's go on to Rob Arnold. Rob, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and give us a brief introduction?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Thanks for taking time on the call today. Rob Arnold with the Health Commons Project. And what's interesting that, we are a part of this technology world, but the majority of our work is really helping communities, and we'll give the example here of the Kittitas County Health Network, but helping communities like Kittitas, and then also working with Yakima Nation, helping them figure out how to organize personalized care for vulnerable populations. So it's a lot of work that we do is really kind of helping communities set up their services to deliver personalized care, and then put in some of the digital infrastructure to support that care. So there's different models that people use to kind of organize and do this care. Part of it is technology, like you're hearing from DataMotion. Other parts of it are really kind of holistic services, like San Diego 211, or there's another great service on the East Coast called City Block. But essentially, it's how an organization gets set up and kind of does this type of work, and then puts in the tools. And we're kind of this third option, which is really about how to help communities like those in Kittitas, where they have a lot of the agencies and service providers, medical and social, in the community, and just really being their partner to help them set up and organize the care. So, we do use technology. We don't build any technology. We partner in with groups like DataMotion and so forth, but we're really more of an entity that partners in with community members to set up personalized care for vulnerable populations, and then implement the tools and the regulatory framework and the workflows and all that good stuff. So that's just a little bit about Commons Project.
Very nice. Rim, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I'm Rim Cothran. I am a consultant that's supporting the various ACHs in Washington on their health IT projects and strategy. And I have spoken some with Rob about the Commons Project there, and have a basic understanding of some of the things that he's been doing. And I have some understanding of DataMotion and some of the things that they've been doing as well. not necessarily specific to today's discussion, but at least some familiarity there. I've been working in health IT and specifically in interoperability for about 15 years now, and been concentrating at state level and community level projects for probably the last 6 or 8 years.
Great. Thank you all on the phone. Let's go ahead and start introducing GCACH staff. And Sam, we'll start with you since you're on the phone.
Hi, I'm Sam Riddell, and I'm the Director of Practice Transformation with GCACH. I am driving the practice transformation efforts with my team with 2 navigators. Messaging across the state of Oklahoma and some parts of Oregon. I know that our practice navigators is here and mentioned that it's one of the menu items that we are offering, as well as the health comments for ORN. As far as practice transformation, we have a lot of entities that do not have a way of securely communicating with their community. And so that's one of our non-inexpensive ways to be able to import secure messaging or some sort of communication method within our organization.
Great. Thank you. Carol, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, this is Carol Moser. I'm the Executive Director of Greater Columbia ECH. Thanks everybody for being on the call today. I'm Jenna Shelton. I'm one of the Practice Transformation Navigators. Becky Cole, I'm the Director of Finance and Contracts.
Ruben Peralta, I'm the Community and Tribal Engagement Specialist.
I'm Wes Lucky. I'm the Deputy Director.
Lauren Noble, Marketing Manager. Chelsea Chapman, Administrative Assistant. This is Rachel Geddes. I'm the Finance and Contracts Coordinator.
Martin Sanchez, Practice Transformation Navigator.
Diane Scalo, I'm the Opioid Resource Network Project Manager.
So we decided to organize this meeting today to introduce staff a little more thoroughly with some of the technologies that we're using. For those of us, in fact, for all of us that went to the recent learning symposium, and you attended that session on collective medical management, we learned a little bit more about that technology, and we've also picked up some presentations that they've given before that time. Direct secure messaging and the health commons are 2 other technologies that, as Sam talked about, we have direct secure messaging in place with our practice transformation navigators, practice transformation providers, excuse me. And health commons has one implementation in place and one currently under development. So the purpose of today is to receive presentations from these 2 great organizations and to ask questions to aid in us understanding. So does anybody have questions about what we want to do today? Let's go ahead and get started. Hugh, do you want to go ahead and turn the screen over to you?
I'm ready.
Okay, hang on just a second. You're going to receive a message in just a second.
Okay. So far, so good.
Yeah.
Hearing.
There we go.
There we go. That means you see something?
We see you.
You have a great meeting. All right. Let me see if I can make it more interesting for you.
Oh, great.
All right. So if I've got this set up correctly, you should see a slide that says data in motion and the evolving regulatory environment.
We see
Are we tracking?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Excellent. So please ask questions as we go along. I will try to put this into the context that you guys live in, which is the real world, for most of us anyway. The regulatory world is kind of its own environment. a little ivory towerish in many ways, but ultimately it does impact what we are asked to do on the ground. So I'd like to start off a little bit by talking about some of the regulation that is driving the different types of secure messaging capabilities that we have at DataMotion. DataMotion Direct. All right, I will get to those regulations, I promise. Let's take a look at one way that we meet regulation, and this is regulation for around health information exchange, national health information exchange. This is a promoting interoperability requirement, a meaningful use requirement, a MIPS requirement, and if you look at a lot of the other CMS incentive programs, like ones for chronic care management, others for like joint procedures, bundled payments, they all have like a kind of a promoting interoperability component that requires them to share messages through a health information exchange channel. So what we do has a role in just about all of the big CMS incentive payment programs for quality-based reimbursement. Let me know if there's any questions as we move along here. So Direct Trust fits into the category of a national health exchange network. It's not the only network that is national. Epic has its own network, as you may know. It's called Care Everywhere. There's another group called Commonwealth, which is anchored by the likes of Meditech and NextGen and a couple of other big EHRs. And then you have the Care Quality Network, which actually just received a pretty big and important, it was the Sequoia group, which is connected to Care Quality, that just got a pretty important mandate to act on something called TEFCA, which is the official kind of blueprint that National Exchange is going to follow, supposed to be following. These are, I think, probably they're very interesting days for all of these networks. Care Quality in particular is close to the TEFCA developments. Direct secure messaging or direct trust is absolutely a part of this national network. It has specialized capabilities which the other network providers do not have. We are a push network, which basically means we store and forward messages much like a fax machine would store and forward. And if you're thinking about what does direct messaging kind of align with, or what's it like, it's kind of like fax. It's kind of like secure mail or secure email, and the workflows for direct messaging are very similar to the workflows deployed for those technologies. What we are all trying to get rid of, all of these networks, the fax machine, virtual private networks, HL7 interfaces, basically all these different kinds of connectivity methods that really aren't interoperable because they're proprietary, controlled by special interests maybe, and expensive. So direct trust is all about coast-to-coast data exchange, secure data exchange through a push method. There are about 40 nodes on the direct trust network, or network operators, also known as health information service providers, or HISPs. DataMotion is one of those. We've got about almost 2 million endpoints. That is significant in terms of growth, but still pales by comparison with fax, which is something like 15 million direct messaging can compete with and possibly overtake, which, that is something that we think. There's a lot of upside potential for direct. Other big news about direct messaging is that Direct Trust recently surpassed 1 billion direct messages per year, which is still quite low compared to 9 billion fax messages exchanged per year. But we're on the scoreboard, and we are we're moving up, and we're players. Any questions about direct messaging? What it is?
That last bullet, Hugh, EHRs enabled greater than 350.
Right. So any EHR that was certified by ONC under the 2014 or 2015 certification cycle was required to implement the ability to send and receive by the direct method. So there is already a port deployed in these 350 EHRs, which range from the big boys, Epic, Meditech, NextGen, Athena Health, eClinicalWorks, right down to smaller, very specialized EHRs for like physical therapy or increasingly behavioral health. So these all have the ability to connect to the direct network. Some of them, haven't selected a health information service provider to connect them. That would be something that DataMotion would do. So if you come across a behavioral health EHR that's kind of standing isolated from the rest of the community and can't communicate, direct secure messaging is probably a protocol that would be easy to stand up and make good use of in that kind of an environment. Direct is often viewed as sort of the poor man's interoperability method. It's all internet-based. It's mainly based on email protocols, so it's not an expensive transport method. But having said that, it has pretty sophisticated PKI identity authentication built into it, and it also carries structured data in an HL7 formatted payload. So it can completely interoperate with EHRs, but it uses the tracks of the internet rather than an HL7 type of a transport or a FHIR API. Questions? I'll just comment briefly that FHIR is certainly out there. That's FHIR. That is a method of querying EHRs for discrete data, used pretty widely and increasingly by mobile devices, patient health records, and they are looking for discrete updated information about things like blood pressure, sugar level, data that is basically found in specific fields. Direct secure messaging is more in the area of delivering longitudinal data, like a report of a patient's post-visit medications, problems, complaints, a format with standard headers, but that's more the kind of data that direct secure messaging delivers. Longitudinal, more of a report, still interoperable. It's an XML format that our data is carried in, so it can be transitioned right into an EHR's record, but it does tend to be more reported or longitudinal data and not necessarily real-time discrete data. Okay.
Very good.
Also in the portfolio, we have different flavors of secure mail, which is also known as electronic secure messaging, which is also known as email encryption, principally used for HIPAA compliance. The different flavors that we have enable a workflow, for example, an automated workflow that allows you to, for example, send out a batch of thousands of bills, let's say, or thousands of care reports at 2 in the morning, and the process is completely automated, and it's a bulk process, and everything is encrypted. That would be an example of secure mail automation. We can move around secure files. HEDIS files tend to be real big. We transport a lot of HEDIS files, and then we have different capabilities to launch secure messaging secure messaging sessions from, let's say, the service page, the customer service page of a practice's website. Somebody wants to launch an email conversation. They click on secure contact, and an email interface is automatically popped, and they can carry on a dialogue securely with whomever is on the other end of that connection. Secure forms, you probably filled out a number of these yourself, much more convenient than typing into a PDF. You simply populate the form on an HTML screen, and the data then can go to a back end where it's sorted, sliced, and diced, and either archived or analyzed. We do that piece as well. Cool. So, sometimes we are deploying these different capabilities as point solutions. Somebody just wants to send out blood work to all their patients every night, and they click a button and it all goes out by secure mail automation. Others are more sophisticated. We have quite a number of call center or contact center customers that have put together multiple point solutions. So these would include the automation piece, the secure mail, what we call a desktop piece, a gateway piece, and to some extent the direct secure messaging, and create a call center front end, which is usually a patient engagement portal, a physician engagement portal, and basically present the ability to deliver information in a HIPAA compliant way to portal users, to initiate email-based dialogues, secure email-based dialogues between agents, physicians, patients, caregivers that have questions. And as part of this Secure Messaging Center effort, we have also integrated with Salesforce, Avaya Call Center, and another call centers that have portals. Most of them do. Those portals, of course, all need to be HIPAA compliant if they are moving PHI or ePHI to be more specific. And I think you're going to see in the next couple of months, maybe the next 12 months, a lot more data flowing through portals, because under CMS and ONC proposed rules, patients are supposed to get much more data, their data that they owned, within 24 hours of a claim or 24 hours of an encounter. So there is going to be a big tsunami. If all of these CMS proposals come through in 2020, and I'm talking here about 21st century cures, stuff and data blocking prohibitions and penalties. If this kind of stuff starts to really become reality, become legislation, there's going to be a lot more data, a lot more PHI that health plans and providers are going to need to provide to patients, and a lot of that is most likely going to go through some kind of a portal. Sound okay?
Yeah.
All right, just briefly, and tell me if I'm running over time here or just not hitting points that are of value. I'm again just trying to make it relevant. HIPAA started in 1996. The mandate was to basically transform paper into electronic metadata, and then make that transportable. Then came the basically the EHR incentive program, which said, okay, now that this data is mobile, it's liquid, let's start to aggregate it, make sense of it, deliver better outcomes with it. And now we have moved, from left to right to this area, the 21st Century Cures Act, which really puts the accelerator on, again, putting this data, this electronic data, putting it into patients' hands quickly, with high volume and a lot of diversity. So 21st Century Cures, if you haven't heard that term, it may not be actually up at the level of the E-suite. People who know about 21st Century Cures are sometimes more like in the analytics department of a hospital, or sometimes in maybe the compliance area. And not all of the E-suite people know about it. So if you want to come off looking, smart and like you see what's coming, targeting these 21st Century Cures Act legislative pieces is, it really is, it should be on the agenda of the C-suite. We can come back to this. I can give you this presentation, but there are a number of different pieces of legislation that relate to 21st Century Cures. And then you've got another couple of pieces of legislation that will, in your area, attract attention. One is the offshoot of GDPR programs in California. It's the, I can't remember the acronym now, it should be here, CCFA or CC, California Privacy Act. I think there's one in Oregon. There may be one in Washington also, but these are kind of GDPR copycats that guarantee or seek to guarantee general privacy of personal 42 CFR Part 2, which is undergoing revision and to some extent is being loosened because of the opioid crisis, but is also in other ways being more tightly enforced. And we do have solutions for that. Okay, so what's the net impact of all of these different legislative programs, policies? A lot more and bigger PHI that needs to be transported. It's got to go to a lot more parties, patients, physicians, caregivers. Got to allow more access to PHI. You're supposed to actually allow access to PHI where the patient is and where the patient wants it. So that could be a mobile phone. That could be a desktop. Delivery's got to be fast because we're talking in many cases about a 24-hour delivery turnaround. And basically in all this, HIPAA still applies. So, HIPAA in implementations can cause some friction. It tends to slow down data. We think that we've optimized our infrastructure so that we can deliver or e-deliver information kind of at high speed while still staying within the requirements of HIPAA and other legislation. I'm being very regulation centric here. Let me point out something that's functional. Among the new data, USCDI V1, this box that you see in the lower right-hand corner, this represents additional data that's going to need to be shared, need to be transported, need to be delivered. One of the functional management workflows for this data is to send ADT notifications, admit, discharge, transfer, when one of these data points or two of these data points, or however many they may be, causes the patient to require a change in venue. So if the patient is being discharged from the ER, ADT alerts increasingly are going out to the PCP for that patient. Maybe some specialists. It's really up to the patient to create the right ADT send workflow, and then you have also increasingly the ACO is going to want that ADT also, because they're not only interested in claims, they're actually interested in clinical progress. So I'd say that ADTs are a big deal, and a big deal for direct secure messaging. We send a lot of them, a lot of ADTs. Other observations as we look at the healthcare community, the healthcare progression of healthcare through a community. We're seeing lots of needs to integrate, embed secure messaging, interoperable messaging in some cases, embed into third-party systems that they're not EHRs, they're Salesforce, they're some kind of an HIE, might be Outlook. So I'd say a big trend that we see is bringing secure direct messaging into new workflows, not just EHRs. EHRs are almost like a database, and we got plenty of other endpoints now, like population health endpoints, for example, that use the EHR almost as a data repository and nothing more. They just draw the data in, and all the analysis gets done in the Pop Health. How am I doing on time?
You're fine. You have a few more minutes here.
All right. Some indications that direct secure messaging is growing, aside from the fact that we did 1 billion transactions last year. If you take a look at, or if you know somebody, or if you yourself have recently applied for an NPI number, there is now in the NPI form a field for a direct secure messaging endpoint. And I think this is a pretty honest view of what that NPI form looks like. But the idea is that in addition to having the physician's phone number and fax number, you would also have their direct secure messaging address to exchange data by the direct protocol. So, this is one kind of indicator that direct messaging really is here to stay, and it's getting traction. Other issues driving uptake of direct messaging. You probably heard about data blocking. Data blocking has already been associated with some million-dollar fines. I think that the enforcement is probably still kind of weak or tentative at the moment. But if a provider that controls EPHI stands in the way of sharing that because of a technical reason or a business reason, they could be subject to a penalty and also being shamed on some sort of a public wall of shame. I'm not sure if they're going ahead with that, but that was actually one of the suggestions. All right, so delivery, it's got to be fast. If you come across digital transformation programs, digital transformation is all about speed of delivery. Same thing in our world of PHI exchange. Got to be quick about it, and it's got to be delivered in a time frame, or some objective that is linked to some money is going to be missed. Let's see. So, when you go out there and you see people using fax services and courier services to carry a thumb drive, there's a courier service, post service, carry a thumb drive down to the radiology lab. That is absolutely a workflow that is in need of automation that we can do with direct secure messaging. Also, these HL7, very expensive HL7 proprietary interfaces that bring data into EHRs. Many of them are overkill, and you could achieve a similar outcome or even a better outcome by just moving data into the EHR using the direct secure messaging protocol. All right, so what's the challenge in this new world of regulation? We as a HISP, as a provider of encrypted email, we've got to deliver more data. It's going to be bigger data. It's got to be delivered to more endpoints through more workflows, and it's all got to be at a high speed of e-delivery. And if that's not enough, it all has to be compliant still with HIPAA and other rules. So that's the challenge. That's the opportunity. And I hope as you're out there and you're seeing workflows that are going by fax, for instance, that just look like they are due for an upgrade, direct messaging is absolutely something that can be presented. And then the real easy ones are people that are attesting for any kind of CMS incentive program that fits with quality, pay for quality. They too have data sharing measures that they have to meet, and we can do that with direct secure messaging. Any questions?
Yeah, Hugh, this is Wes. In a real brief description, let's say a rural community hospital had to come up to speed pretty quickly with the 21st Century Cures Act. From a practical standpoint, what would they need to do? Briefly.
I would say that just generally in terms of interoperability, they want to steer clear of data blocking. I think the data blocking issue has gotten somewhat up to the executive level, but those really are $1 million fines, and I can dig them out of the legislation to show you. But they, as an insurance policy almost against getting hit with those, enable direct secure messaging. Start using it. So that's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is they're going to have to deliver much more patient data to patients than they ever have previously, and all of that data is going to need to be delivered in a HIPAA compliant fashion. I don't know that patient portals that are set up now really have the scalability to handle all that data. Not all of the data is even going to come from the EHR. There's going to be data that a hospital might have that doesn't come from the EHR that still has to be delivered. So I would focus also on, patient engagement. How are you going to get this, huge increase in volume of secure data? How are you going to get that into the hands of your patients in a timely fashion? So I think those are important questions to ask. Some of the health plans, they're very sensitive about net promoter scores, about these 5-star ratings that CMS gives them, offering great security in their patient communications or the physician communications actually can raise those scores from a 3.5 star to a 4-star. And that half a star can mean, X number of new members. So those are a few ideas. If you haven't approached health plans and health plans qualify for your incentives, I would encourage trying to take a shot at them. They for the most part have some money, and they're probably the most behind in terms of automation. The providers themselves are in the lead. So I would spend some time with health plans. But after the presentation, I am happy to give you a couple of real, targeted audiences with specific pitches that you can go out with.
That would be helpful. Let's circle back to that if we have time. And in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and move forward to bring on Rob, and Rob will transfer the presentation over to you.
Okay.
Hang on just a second here as we move from Hugh over to Rob.
Got a backseat driver.
You don't need me to do that, right?
No, I think you're good.
Okay.
There we go.
I got 3 keyboards.
So, where's the screen?
Yes, that's
it.
Rob, you
meeting now.
There it is. Let's go ahead. Okay, Rob, you're up.
All right. Can everybody see okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, great. Yeah, it's one I know Wes is familiar with. Well, thanks everybody, and thanks also to Hugh for a great talk on kind of how the technologies are really just dramatically changing. So kind of the issues that Hugh brought up on, no more data blocking. So interoperability is now a requirement as opposed to, oh, well, wouldn't it be nice to have? Now it's actually a requirement. There is more emphasis on patient engagement. And when you look at what's possible today using cloud computing, we really are at a remarkable time of transformation. And so the work that we're doing with some of the Greater Columbia communities, specifically with GCACH, is really about how do we take advantage of all of these great things that Hugh just mentioned, but kind of starting from the patient point of view. So who are these patients in our community? What services do they really need? And as you had mentioned, that there's this new idea called social determinants of health. So in essence, not only can we care for their medical needs and specialty medical needs, but ultimately, what are the other factors that are involved in overall community health and well-being? This is a new area, and one that I think is really exciting, and it's all based on the great work that was done in the medical and specialty world. So we're able to now leverage some of the tools, the technologies, and the innovations that have come out of the medical world to now see if we can kind of reorganize the way we think about care. And so this talk is just a quick summary of the work that we've been doing with the Kittitas County Health Network. And what we're doing there in Kittitas is we're specifically focused on vulnerable populations. So as we know, in an entire population, that covers healthy people, working people, all sorts of stuff. This is really looking at the 5% of the population that really consumes a lot of healthcare costs. So we call it the 550, but the 5% of the population that consumes about 50% of the cost. So we'll just kind of walk in and kind of tell you what's going on in Kittitas. Let's see. So can everybody see the next slide?
Yes.
Okay, great. So this is the Kittitas County Health Network at a glance, and we call it local, personalized, holistic, and connected. So when they started kind of looking at their care population, they looked at some of the individuals that were very vulnerable and were using a lot of the public resources there, like law enforcement, fire department, emergency medical services, and so forth. So oftentimes these are the folks that can be invisible to the medical part of the system. These are folks that are kind of cycling in and out of the system and aren't necessarily always connected to care. And so what GCACH did, and this was, GCACH was really developed with some initial funding from Greater Columbia ACH and so forth. And Wes and Carol went through a process as we were introduced a while back. GCACH was starting to really develop its community care services. And when we had originally talked about saying, are there any communities in Greater Columbia that could take it, might benefit from a digital boost to the work that they're doing, GCACH they were pretty much the standout applicant for doing this partnership work. So a little bit about GCACH, and I'll just I won't read the slide specifically, but the summary to the slide here is that GCACH really recognized there were individuals that were overutilizing the 911 system. And these folks were calling in for what are considered to be low acuity, but oftentimes very complex care. So 911 has advanced life support, basic life support, but this new care type has shown up in their call volumes. And in other cases around Washington State, it's about 1.2%, 1.3% of the callers are accounting for about 40% of the call volume. So if you think about for community and community planning, that's not necessarily somebody's needs are going to be addressed by law enforcement or sending $1.5 million fire truck to their home with a firefighter when somebody might be dealing with a behavioral health issue. So the GCACH service is really designed to care for these complex individuals that don't necessarily have emergent medical needs, and their medical needs, overall medical needs, might be more towards the behavioral side and social health versus other types of specialty care. So hopefully that makes sense. But the way the process works is GCACH gets a referral, usually from 911. They now have a community paramedic that does in-home visits. That community paramedic can do an interview of the clients and then create a little summary of the encounter, send this back electronically to the GCACH team, and they do collect the consent. We don't do anything without having the client being comfortable with this work, and the consent covers all the way to 42 CFR Part 2. So whether they're dealing with substance use disorder or not, we consent people to the max if they really want to participate in this service. I won't bore you with the sub details of it, but we've been working with the federal guidelines and then the chief privacy officer of the healthcare authority to make sure that we would have a broad enough consent to cover the use cases in which this information would be shared. Once an interview is completed, then the community paramedic with their either iPad or Microsoft Surface notebook sends the referral electronically back to what's called the A team at GCACH. The A team is made up of specialty providers, staffed by the hospital, staffed by fire and rescue, staffed by behavioral health specialists, staffed by housing providers. So there's 35 different agencies that are connected to GCACH. And once the A team prepares the care plan, then they can coordinate the downstream referrals to make sure that the client is getting the care that they need, and then they can really track each step electronically. So the most important thing, it was service transformation being done at the same time you're creating the digital support system to do that work. So, and we'll talk more about it, but that's one of the key learnings, is that you want to do the service transformation and the digital at the same time. So, and this is just kind of an example of one of GCACH's success story, and this is it's a fictitious name, Jerry, but the story is real. But Jerry was an individual. This kind of gives you an example of how this works. Jerry, fairly young, but was involved, had a brain injury from a car accident. Over the last 2 years, multiple times per week, was calling 911 to help with some mobility issues around the house. And it was something where it was definitely using a lot of community resources to deal with Jerry's issue. And then they decided, Fire and Rescue routed the call to GCACH, where GCACH connected Jerry to a behavioral health specialist. And so they started unpacking Jerry's story, and it turns out his brain injury was a result of a drunk driving accident, where it was a fatality, which was causing deep depression for Jerry. And again, to the brilliance of GCACH, this is not a digital thing, this is a GCACH innovation thing. They actually connected Jerry to the high school so he could talk about his experience and the shame that went along with drunk driving and being involved in this incident. And this actually helped Jerry's recovery, where all of a sudden the 911 calls stopped, and Jerry's now found a little bit more peace with his own situation. So if we kind of look at Jerry's story, that's not an unusual story, sadly, in today's world, that people are experiencing life in all sorts of different ways. And it is, you need to have the right community services organized and connected to be able to do this type of care. And in the case of GCACH, and I loved all the points that he was making, had GCACH been doing Jerry's care the traditional way, it would have been a lot of phone calls and a lot of faxes and a lot of routing to be able to figure this stuff out. And by putting in the digital infrastructure to support GCACH and the care coordination between these partners, it really does make a difference. And if you kind of drop a level down and what does this really look like, we really do have a closed loop referral system to support the GCACH team. So pretty much just as I kind of walk through in the slide above, you can digitally connect and track at each step. And the system we use is for GCACH follows the standards guidelines from the 360X project that ONC supports on, proper closed loop referrals. So the ability to send a referral, accept a referral, decline a referral, ask for more information, a unique identifier for that referral, and make sure that you track each and every step. But again, the technology only does a portion of this. It's the people and they're understanding their roles, responsibilities, and their incentives to be able to really integrate this care and take care of individuals like Jerry. So So how or why did community leaders in Kittitas create this network? And again, you got to give credit to Greater Columbia ACH. It's really through the Medicaid transformation waiver. And it was, part is community passion to make sure that they're caring for the most vulnerable. But a big part of it is the Medicaid transformation and the role of Greater Columbia ACH to put the funding together and put the expertise together and connect those dots. So it's, I call healthcare and social determinants of care for a vulnerable population the ultimate team sport. Nobody's going to crack this as a solo act. You've got to put the right pieces together. You got to put the right incentives together, and it's a lot of hard work to do this. So why does Kittitas want to keep doing this work? And we'll talk more about this probably in a future call. But the basic idea with social determinants is that we spend an awful lot of money on medical care for individuals like Jerry that may or may not be beneficial. And so the question is, are there ways we can reallocate some of those dollars to better support individuals like Jerry and their community and sustain a group like KCHN? And, just some interesting facts that about 3 days of time in the hospital from a cost basis is equal to about 3 months in the county jail, which is equal to about 1 year of affordable housing. So there's really interesting ways to kind of realign dollars in a community. In Jerry's case, Jerry did have a home, but you can see how the community balance sheet in Kittitas, if you start to look at how those dollars could be redistributed in the community and to support this type of care for vulnerable populations, there's a lot of good that can come out of it. So what's next for KCHN? We're really, really excited. They've just been an unbelievable partner for this work, but they've actually launched a care coordination work group meeting with the other Commons community partners that are working across Washington State, and we have our first site in Oregon that is now developing, and the first meeting for that group is next Tuesday. So we're starting to and again, this is the community members doing this. Commons is more just trying to put together the toolkits and the frameworks and the documentation to make sure folks can keep doing this work. But I'd really emphasize these are community-led activities and supported by kind of a toolkit and a platform to do this work. KCHN continues to add new clients from referrals, and we're now starting to work out the next care partners and care types to add to the system. And then we've also started working with Dr. Bob Crittenden. I'm sure many of you may know Dr. Bob, but he's been working with another researcher named Dr. Len Nichols on how to really put together the financing and sustainability for these types of programs. So that we're still kind of learning what those opportunities really are, but we're excited to be part of that work effort with Dr. Crittenden and Dr. Nichols. Here's what UW Valley Medicine is working on an opioid treatment network in South King County. And so they're an example where UW was not necessarily going with this type of KCHN model, but they are putting together an opioid treatment network. Will kind of be its own little unique network for this work. And we just implemented the first draft view of it. And what's kind of fun is Ideal Option, which has a home over in the Greater Columbia region, is one of the care partners for this network. So it's funny how this work is interconnected in so many different ways. But this particular workflow was about when an individual enters the Kent County Jail and they're clearly going through opioid withdrawal or dealing with basically the substance use issue, that and UW Valley Medicine has a contract with Kent City Jail where they actually have a nurse in the care facility that's caring for folks. That nurse would now be able to use the Commons Network to, if they identify somebody that would benefit from medication-assisted treatment, the nurse can fill out a quick profile, send it over to the care coordinator for UW Valley, and the care coordinator can then meet with that client, get them, if they're eligible for enrollment, the care coordinator will enroll them, and then send the referral over to Ideal Options for engagement. So this is a really innovative approach that they're trying to do, and lots of other sites are looking at these models too. But for UW Valley, they really wanted to have an electronic way to manage and track this. So we're excited with the progress on that one. We also have, as Wes mentioned, we have other communities that are doing this work. We did get funding and approval to launch a program in South King County. So not only with UW Valley Medicine, but also with Puget Sound Fire and TriMed Ambulance. We just got approval to launch a new service very similar to GCACH in Clallam County with the Olympic Communities of Health. So super excited about that. And then we're also working with City of Gresham and Oregon Health Sciences University and the School of Nursing there, which is now wanting to use the toolkit to help set up City of Gresham with their own neighborhood network. So it's getting out there, which is really fun to see. What is Health Commons Project? It really is a community-owned and led nonprofit to help communities like Kittitas, like South King, like Gresham, accelerate the development of this neighborhood health system. And our view is these communities do have the resources they need to set up this type of work and offer this type of personalized care to vulnerable populations, but they could really use a boost because as Hugh was saying, the technology can be pretty complicated. So we try to partner with the communities and then help them organize the technology so they can take advantage of it. And the key to the Commons is that the digital platform workflows, toolkits, et cetera, but we also do cost sharing amongst the communities. So we really try to keep the costs low for these systems. I know Hugh would probably have lots of examples where, people have spent, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars deploying EHR systems. Well, there's just no way that's going to happen in a small community like Kittitas. So we have to use cloud computing. We have to use advanced technologies and then try to keep the costs really, really, really low for them. And the vendors we work with, we don't develop software ourselves. We partner in the tools, but we do ask our vendors for pretty significant discounts to put these tools in place in the communities. And for the simple reason, if we're going to sustain this work, if we're going to care for these vulnerable populations, we have to make sure that we've got a model that can keep this work going. So that's it. And then, how does Commons really compare with other groups doing this type of work? You've probably heard about community information exchanges and organizations like San Diego 211, or there's a great one called City Block in New York, where some of them take a technology first approach, some are taking it as a service first approach. Our vision for it is really, it's like for the communities that want to do this work, and by the way, communities should consider all of those options, whatever works best for them. For communities that do want to take on this kind of work, but they need help kind of figuring out the roadmap and they need a toolkit to do it, that's really where the Commons fits, is on that side. So some quick summaries and learnings. I'm a software developer by background, and I didn't realize I was now going to become a community organizer, but I'm having a lot of fun with it. But I also know, and I have great respect for what Carol and Wes and the Greater Columbia team does. It's really hard. Organizing communities around this is really hard and it's very time consuming, but it's also very rewarding. The regulatory and data sharing roadmap is extremely complicated but solvable. So just as Hugh said, we now have a way, there's so much more resource, and the federal policies are now in alignment for communities to do this kind of work. And so the data blocking and all that other stuff we're now getting through. And as Hugh said, even 42 CFR has a provision around data sharing. So, and that was, developed last year. So these things, we're moving to openness, and as Hugh really emphasized, patient rights to information, and we can't block this stuff anymore. So I think we're on the right, it's the right time, and it's the right trends are starting to happen. The other thing that this is my biggest learning out of all this is it's important to do the service and the digital transformation at the same time. What some of the most interesting work I've done is just building some internal consistency between language used between different service providers and care types. Everybody describes the same thing differently. And so by building some internal consistency to the language, it's really improving the way people communicate with each other. I think that's one of the great side effects of doing this work. We don't sell to communities. Communities have to want to do this work because it is really hard. So, we're here to help if a community wants to work with us. We're here to help. We're here to serve. But we're not here to sell anybody anything. They either want it and they have the wherewithal to partner with Greater Columbia and others to do this work. And if they're not ready for it, that's fine too. We also have to be radically transparent at each and every step of this process, because no one starts at the finish line. So we use agile development techniques to design, develop, test, debug, repeat. Design, develop, test, debug, repeat. So it's a lot of that. And then it is a team sport. And we really keep our focus on, who are the individuals in our community and how do we serve them best. So that North Star really keeps us going. And none of this work sustainability. There's lots of changes going on in the system. Sustainability is not guaranteed. So we're really focused on showing improvements to care. But that's it. Any questions?
That was a great presentation. Thank you, Rob. Rim, while you're on the phone, I'll give you the first ask. Do you have any questions about either Hugh's or Rob's presentations?
Well, I did have one question for Hugh, if he's still on. You had talked quite a bit about PHI and the regulation associated with exchanging PHI. The 21st Century Cures Act started referring to electronic health information, which, if I recall the definition, that includes controlled unclassified information. Do you see any impact there to, what we need to be concerned about in sharing health information and the shift to those new terms?
Right. So the term that I hear is ETI, Echo, Thomas, Indigo, which seems to be a combination of the EPHI we all know and love, and then some other data that really is, maybe doesn't qualify as EPHI, but all the, nevertheless, it's still kind of in the realm of shouldn't be shared. And I showed a pretty good slide of all that data, which I can send back to you. So did I say ETI? I meant EHI, electronic health information. So that represents a much bigger data set that needs to be protected. And potentially that means that the pipes that are laid out there to carry this data might, start to swell up a little bit and maybe explode. Something that we have on the data motion side is we got a like a multi-gigabyte pipe diameter that will let this data flow, and then when it gets to its destination, you have a whole issue about distributing it to the right endpoints. So I think that I haven't really taken a deep dive into exactly what the nature of this EHI is and to whom it needs to be delivered, but it is a significantly bigger data set that needs to be protected than was done previously. And I think part of this is going to come from just like sampling the market and seeing what people are dealing with. But you know, I think the headline story is you know, some multiple of the data you're dealing with now is going to have to be delivered potentially in the next 12 months if this these proposed rules make it to legislation.
All right, thank you. And then, Rob, I had a question for you. You talked about consenting the individuals, including allowing exchange of information that would be covered under 42 CFR Part 2. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that. So is that a full end-to-end single consent model? And how, if so, how difficult was it to come up with something that would work in those circumstances? It's one of the things that I hear a lot of organizations really struggling over, and so I'm kind of interested in your process.
Yeah, it's a great question. And so the way, and I worked with Matthew King, who is the Chief Privacy Officer for State of Washington, and really read through all his summer regulations for this. And probably the biggest insight for me was if we consent the individual correctly, meaning that it's always informed consent. Does the person know what they're consenting to? And if you look at where a lot of the issues come up with, collection of information, who really have the authority to share and all this other stuff. But and the way GCACH is, it's really a closed network of providers. So they're all under the same BAAs and under the same data sharing and governance. But the way it works is whether the person has an SUD or not. And I'm happy to share the consent with you, but we really walk them through. We give them a brochure on what the KCHN services are. We give them the consent, which has the 42 CFR language in it, which allows for sharing in a health information exchange. And that's really the key. And Matthew King was really at the leading edge on what could be consented. But the way we don't actually collect 42 CFR information at the time we onboard a client. So one of the ways that the model gets really interesting is that there's this implication that when I've consented somebody, I've instantly collected SUD information, and then I'm creating a private sharing with some limited number of providers that would be caring for this individual. I think that model still works, but we collect the consent. We don't collect the 42 CFR restricted information at the time of the onboarding. We just collect the consent, and the consent travels with the referrals where it goes. By the time one of our clients might see an SUD provider, we've already consent, and then you can create the exchange of SUD information off of the Commons network, if that makes sense. I don't know if I'm giving you a good explanation of it, but it's kind of like we consent, and the consent is shareable with everybody in the community. But when you collect the restricted information for 42 CFR, that can usually be done in the behavioral health providers EHR and stuff. So we don't even have to put any of that information. We just send them the referral. They can the behavioral health specialist or the MAT provider can then capture the 42 CFR information. So in the other example for UW Valley Medicine and the opioid treatment networks, that information that we're collecting there would not be shared with, let's say, through a KCHN network. so to speak. It's a subsystem. And so it actually, those records wouldn't be linked.
Thanks. Yeah, that's really helpful.
Yeah, so the consent is always shareable, but the 42 CFR restricted information is a subsystem.
Yep. Understood. Okay, thank you.
Okay, sorry for the long answer on that. Not an easy topic.
It's not an easy topic. There are no short answers. So
there are no, yes, exactly.
Wes, I don't know that I have any other questions right now.
Thank you. Does anybody else, Sam, do you have questions, or does anybody in the room have questions about this?
I do not. Thank you.
Nobody? You know, Hugh, can you talk a little bit, I don't know if you mentioned this, but can you talk a little bit about what your experience has been locally with some of our local providers? Have you done any implementations here within the 9-county region that we serve that you know of?
You know, I don't know if it's because we haven't quite covered all the ground, or we've just covered ground that has been previously covered, so to speak. Our, big discussion was with Prosser. It seemed that there was a requirement there for their promoting interoperability MIPS attestation. But then we kind of figured out that they were utilizing a direct secure messaging service from maybe their affiliate in Oregon, wherever their head office or their controlling partner resides. They seem to be able to source it from there. So that was kind of that. We did talk a little bit in the EMS environment with their name is going to escape me. Is it Medical Technologies?
Collective Medical.
Collective Medical.
Image
sorry.
Trend. Yeah, an Image Trend.
Yeah, an Image Trend. We were talking a little bit about the concept of sending forward from, let's say, a first responder a health record, medical report using direct secure messaging protocol. I don't know that got very far. There was some other conversation I wasn't completely immersed in. So I know we talked about it, but peripherally in that environment. Otherwise, not really too much engagement. And, I would think that there are some participants in the ACH that, particularly participants that might not have EHRs that can participate, but I have not had audiences with them. So I am happy to try to initiate audiences with them directly with some help from you guys. Or if you guys maybe could try to, just set up a kind of a cluster of meetings. I'm happy to support those. And, let's see if there's still some green field that's left here.
Yeah, so our behavioral health organizations, there were a few of those that were in this first group or cohort, but there were many that are smaller organizations that are going through practice transformation, and some of them are coming on to new EHRs from their old billing systems. Mm-hmm. And within organizations, there may be some opportunities. We've also considered trying to bring direct secure messaging into some of our local EMS service providers. And I think that's something that we're still thinking about as well. So there's potentially opportunities that might be coming up.
Yeah, I don't know what Prosser is a principal. Is it acute care hospital?
Yes, it's a small community acute.
Yeah, it seems to me that they should be sending out ADTs to the community, to, of course, the relevant providers in the community when they're releasing somebody. That is absolutely a proven workflow that both providers and health plans like to see. If they are doing that, I would think that there's some opportunity to set up maybe some community-based care organizations that would want to receive those ADTs that maybe don't have an EHR to do it. That might be some place to start looking.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what Indian Health is doing. They were big into direct secure messaging at one point. I don't know how into it they are now, or what their funding might be, or what their marching orders might be, but at some point they were very heavily into it. If after the meeting somebody would like to get on a call with me and brainstorm a little bit, maybe we can figure out a couple of targets to make a pitch to.
Okay. I don't know. I'm not sure if even Indian Health knows where they're at. They're currently using, and I don't mean that to be facetiously, they just have a lot of real infrastructure and technological challenges that they face. The Indian Health Service is a Toppenish. Their clinic there uses a very antiquated system called RPMS. Yeah. I don't know what, I don't know if that's ONC certified or not. It's older than I am. So, there might be an opportunity there. We'll find out. We're trying to approach them for the core body of our work, this practice transformation process. And as we go through that, we might learn more about what their particular needs are around the service.
Okay, great.
Hugh, just so you're aware, we have behavioral health entities, which we call Cohort 2, that have just come on board, and this is their first reporting period. So one of their things is around HIT integration, and they have to be certified that they have an ONC certified EMR system. The majority of them did not, because they were utilizing Keynotes, and so they're in the process of exchanging to a different EMR system. And so I think that it's an excellent opportunity to be able to present to them. And the practice navigators can help you more with that. They also have a listing of all of our cohort 1, which is the original, primarily primary care, but a list of who might not have it and who would be interested in that. If they have time to go through that list with you or share that list with you, that would be appreciated, navigators. Sure. And then other than that, we are in the process of bringing on cohort 3, so we might have some other opportunity there as well. And in addition to, I'm really interested into the community-based organizations that you were talking about, whether or not that we are contracted with them. I think that definitely an opportunity to look into that as well.
Okay, let's get them while we got the money.
All right, great.
All righty. Anybody else have any other questions? Okay, we're pretty close to time. I appreciate Hugh and Rim and Rob taking the time to present to us. We know how busy you all are, and we hope to follow up with you. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Okay.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.